Well, here is an interesting story that goes right in line with some webbot predictions. Um, it's sounding like this year is starting to turn out to be what webbots had to start looking out for, I guess I should say. Power outages, flooding, rivers drying up. Someone just emailed me another link to a different story that I haven't read yet about another river. Was there last night. We woke up today, it's gone. There's people out there. Looks like another South American type country from the images I saw. And they're kind of like walking out there, and there's just weird green stuff growing out there, and they're like all poking around, like, flabbergasted, I guess you could say. The river was here last night, and we came out here today, and it's gone. Okay, that's weird. You might argue, oh, well, the sun was so hot, we just cooked it, and it was very low. Try to come up with some nonsense excuse as to why the river went away, dried up. Well, it's at nighttime. It was there when you went to bed. You're not going to lose, that much water at night, from evaporation. Not happening. We're not even in the middle of summer right now, for God's sakes. But this story is very interesting, and as soon as I saw the title, this is from shtfplan.com. Interesting website URL, if I don't mind saying so myself. And as soon as I saw that title, I told myself, man, I was just reading the, kind of recatching up on with the old John Teeter stuff. And I forgot a comment he made until I read it, 2 days ago. And it was something along the lines of, I heard California's installing people living in California are installing a lot more wood burning, not oves, did you say stoves or ovens? Either, kind of the same thing. Wood burning stove, wood burning oven, whatever it was that, whichever of those two terms he used. So this is very interesting to me that only place he really mentioned that was California. And I see this title, Blackout, California in Power Grid Emergency. All customers should expect 14 days without power. Now, is that 14 consecutive days or 14 days throughout summer? We're about to find out as I read this. The entire Los Angeles metropolitan area and most of Southern California can expect blackouts this summer. The power grid is under direct threat as a result of the unprecedented, but little reported, massive natural gas leaks at Alasco Canyon that was ongoing for 4 months as an intense summer heat wave sets in. According to Reuters, California will have its first test of plans to keep the lights on this summer, with record-setting heat and air conditioning demand expected in Southern California. The state's power grid operator issued a so-called flex alert, urging consumers to conserve energy to help prevent rotating power outages, which could occur regardless. Electricity demand, and let me stop for a second, because it was like someone was speaking into my head and said, the hand-me-out state we're in these days, the everybody owes me mindset, the I'm going to do it anyways because I can mindset, I don't want to contribute, I'm hot, I'm turning the air on mindset. Imagine those people. Hey, everybody, we're trying to ration power this week or this day or whatever. We need you to maybe would you mind raising the temperature of your thermostats in your house by 2 degrees? We've calculated that'll get us, everyone can have the lights stay on, I can just see this happening. And of course, the self-righteous, everyone owes me everything. I'm not turning my AC down. I pay my bills. This is owed to me. Ain't nobody gonna tell me that I can't do it. Oh, really? Yeah, actually the power's about to get cut off because so many other people thought the same way you did, wouldn't turn their thermostats down, and it overloaded the system. I could just see this happening. Where was I? Electricity demand is expected to rise during the unseasonable heat wave on Monday and Tuesday, with forecast system-wide use expected to top 45,021.1 gigawatts. Unfortunately, you don't know when or where the bolt of lightning is going to strike. We do now, Doc. Save the clock tower. Expected to top 45,000 megawatts, said the California Independent System Operator, ISO, which manages electricity flow through the state. That compares with a peak demand of 47,358 megawatts last year and the all-time high of 50,270 megawatts set in July 2006. That could put stress on the power grid, particularly with the shut-in of Aliso Canyon following a massive gas leak at the underground storage facility in October. Editor's note, which was not stopped fully until mid-February 2016. The large-scale natural gas disaster, which curiously escaped media frenzy and widespread environmental concern, has resulted in the shutdown of key storage facilities that supply most of the power for the southern portion of the state. It appears that old J Snip 4 got in and out of Mexico just in time. Flew into San Diego, crossed the border, surgery, take that cyst out of my foot. Next day, back on a plane, back home. Old J Snip 4 was out. Last minute. That's American style, isn't it? We do things at the last minute. As summer demand for electricity to cool homes and businesses kicks into high gear, power plants are planning to shut down, with supply shortages triggering controlled blackouts and brownouts. Reports say that, quote, all customers should expect to be without power a total of 14 days, 2 weeks' time out of this summer. Some 21 million Californians stand to be directly affected. So a total of 14 days does not mean 14 days consecutively, thank God, because if that was the case, do you know how many people, the hospitals, everything, they'd be, trucking in diesel, fuel, and it would be absolutely chaotic. Just 14 days straight without power at this day and age would be absolutely catastrophic. And from what I'm reading here, it's not going to be 14 consecutive days, just 14 days within the summer. And you might see 1 or 2 days in a row possibly. Who knows, right? I would imagine they would try to do at least one day and not another one consecutively. Naturally, you wouldn't, the longer that happens, the worse it's going to be. But the second you start hearing and experiencing a blackout, as they called it, controlled blackout, that's when people are going to start to realize we should have never stopped prepping. Last year came and went, Shemitah cycle, all this crap. Nothing happened. I'm not prepping, I'm not concerned anymore. That's one of the things me and Lindsay Williams talked about that I forgot to mention, was how he said everyone just practically stopped, everything is fine, we don't care anymore. And he says they could not be further from the truth. Because the elite, as he said, have it planned that they want to try to get this party started with the economy collapsing later this year. They are actually hell-bent on letting it happen this year, he said. So some 21 million Californians stand to be directly affected. All customers, including homes, hospitals, oil refineries, and airports. See, man, J-Snip 4 was out. Are at risk of losing power at some point this summer because a majority of electric generating stations in California use gas as their primary fuel. In April, millions of electric customers in Southern California were warned they could suffer power outages on up to 14 days this summer due to the closure. And I can see this coming from a mile away. We know the whole thing in Japan, Chernobyl. We've had these nuclear accidents, especially Japan, which we've covered up massively. 3 core meltdowns. Nothing like that in history, to my knowledge, has ever happened. Yet I saw a documentary the other day on Chernobyl. They're going back to do testing, and there's actually some families that moved back in to that area. And they said this is still the worst nuclear incident. Even mentioned compared to the one in Japan, this is still the worst one. Well, that's because you're going off of the official statements. Japan had 3 nuclear meltdowns, core meltdowns. Chernobyl, I believe, only had 1. And Japan's has flooded the Pacific Ocean. Imagine that. But we can't talk about that. We don't want to scare the citizenry. Unlike some other gas transmission systems that can store large amounts of so-called line pack gas in pipelines, like PG&E Corp in Northern California, SoCal Gas cannot function with only pipeline or storage supplies. Planned rolling brownouts have been done on a regular basis in Southern California since the days of Enron in the California energy crisis of 2000-2001. But the situation is getting more dire. As demand spikes, customers can expect to pay more for electricity, even as supplies threaten to be cut off, leaving families, residents, and businesses in the dark. All this as California's historic drought problems continue to plague the state and restrict available services. As Tess Pennington notes, this puts stress on the other electrical grids, who then compensate for the loss of energy to that existing grid. When these events take place, there is an overwhelming increase of power in homes and commerce to either generate heat, air conditioning, or electricity. When this need overwhelms the grid, the utility company intentionally shuts off the power to an area in order to reduce the load on electricity generation and grid. The utility company turns it back on and then shuts the power off in a different area, with outages in any given area typically lasting 60 to 90 minutes, according to the California Energy Commission. This is a last resort measure of utility companies to avoid an even worse situation, which would be a total blackout. Of course, there is plenty of room for unplanned blackouts as well, as an increasingly vulnerable power grid nears the perfect conditions for a grid down scenario. In the worst case scenario, these massive power outages, particularly if they are sustained for longer periods, and authorities estimate up to 2 weeks without electricity is likely, though not necessarily in consecutive days, could interrupt other vital services, including grocery deliveries, water, gasoline at the pumps, and even communications, which, strangely enough, is what the webbot has mentioned. The larger question is whether or not they want the grid to fail. It is a simple economic fact that the power companies stand to make more money off a power shortage during a crisis than they do during abundant and cheap energy. Homeland Security and other government agencies have been preparing in secret for a grid disaster for several years now, and I will remind you, Obama himself came out very recently, took the time out to talk about being prepared out of nowhere. Now, isn't that interesting? Former Department of Homeland Security Janet Napolitano ominously warned ahead of the Grid X2 multi-agency drill that an unprecedented collapse of the power grid is imminent and could result from a cyber attack, an EMP, or a massive natural disaster. The outgoing Homeland Security Secretary has a warning for her successor. A massive and serious cyber attack on the U.S. homeland is coming. Not could happen, is coming. And a natural disaster, the likes of which the nation has ever seen, is also likely on its way. An electrical grid joint drill simulation is being planned in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. Thousands of utility workers, FBI agents, anti-terrorism experts, governmental agencies, and more than 150 private businesses are involved in the November power grid drill. That's making me think a little bit here. November, huh? Elections are November. In November. What if, I see government agencies getting together, and I've always noticed false flag attacks and simulations that they're, what they're training on down the street happens in real life right down the street. Oh, we just happen to be here. We'll go deal with that. I certainly hope that the power doesn't go out in November while they're doing their exercises, of course, and then the elections can't go on because, hey, we know it's not the whole United States, folks, but California is a huge vote. There's a lot of people there. We can't deprive them of their right to vote, and the power's been out, and until we can get the power up and working normally, we got to postpone these elections. That would be a real easy way to do it so that the average person is not pissed. Oh, he's trying to stay in the power. He's trying to stay in the power. He's passed it. Oh, well. Yeah, he's just trying to be fair to the people who can't vote. Okay, we'll let him stay a little longer. That'd be the sweet way out of it, right? So it seems that it's not a matter of when, or it is a matter of when, not if. That's why having an off-grid alternative source of energy is essential for any prepper or level-headed individual, though many communities are now discouraging solar by requiring that it be connected to the grid and regulated by the energy companies. I have 8 solar panels. I used to have more. I sold some to my boss because I've never had enough to run my whole house anyways. Certainly couldn't run my AC outside, but I could run a window unit or a portable AC, one on wheels easily, even with the panels I have left. And that was really my intention, enough to run like one little room with AC and then run an extension cord down to, downstairs or whatever, at night or whatever, so that the freezer and refrigerator can, get its source of energy or whatever power from the battery bank that I would have, and then the next day it would charge the battery bank and then run my little AC unit. That was my plan in a worst case scenario, is all I'm saying. So I've said it many times. Let's just look at gold and silver and prep for, raking in some money when the collapse happens, because it's the only thing that's going to save us from the financial calamity. But I've said, I used to have 3 things I tell everybody to get, and I've changed it to 4 now. I've added 1. Yes, you need your precious metals in your possession, not somewhere else, not on paper. Number 2, you've got to have protection for your family. Shotgun, pistol, whatever you prefer, and not just one little box of ammo, because again, you never know how bad things can get in an absolute Mad Max situation where the freaking power grid goes down for days. It would only take that amount of time for things to get crazy. Number 3, food storage, such as dehydrated or freeze-dried foods. Not canned. Oh, I've got a bunch of cans of soup. That's okay. But, man, that freeze-dried and dehydrated stuff lasts for like a decade or more. 20 years in some cases. But to each his own. And the 4th and final thing, which I added not too long ago, is a water purification system. And I'm not talking about a big Berkey. I've got one of those. I'm talking about something that can filter the living hell out of the water, such as a reverse osmosis water system, because as we all use treated water living in the city, I remember seeing plenty of times news stories where all of the pharmaceuticalized people with all of their massive pills they're popping, and then they pee, and it goes in the toilet, and it gets recycled, and it goes back into the water, etc. They're finding trace elements of that crap in the water. Not only that, should a bad biohazard or nuclear hazard happen, I'd like to have a very, very powerful reverse osmosis filter. Now, if a nuclear thing happened, I'd go a step further, and I would distill the water, which we also have a plug-in distiller, which I could easily, again, run off solar panels. Doesn't take that much power. Distills the water. And in case you're wondering, John Teeter did say, be very, very careful about boiling water and distilling it. They're 2 different things. You must distill the water should a nuclear war break out. That was his point. And in his case, he said it is not should it break out. It did break out. And he had a whole lot to say about it. I find it fascinating. Keep an eye on those Olympics, because if those Olympics stop, as I said, I will be reissuing the biggest red alert ever, because it's about to go down. Take care.